Fireball at launch pad. On the 26th of September 1983, two Soviet cosmonauts were seconds from launch when their rocket caught fire underneath them. A faulty valve had let pressurant gas leak into the turbopump, and it spun out of control until it ignited. Commander Titov and flight engineer Strekalov felt violent, shaking, and knew something was wrong. But from inside the capsule, they couldn't see the flames climbing up the booster beneath them. 6 seconds before liftoff, the launch escape system fired, yanking the crew capsule away at up to 17 times the force of gravity. Less than a second later, the rocket exploded into a fireball on the pad. Investigators later discovered that the control cables for the escape system had actually burned through in the fire. If the system had activated just a few seconds later, it wouldn't have worked at all, and the crew would have died in the explosion. It remains the only time in Soviet or Russian history that a crew has caught fire on the launch pad, and the only time an escape rocket has ever been used to save real lives before liftoff. Fatal familiarity. In July 1969, Apollo 11 splashed down safely, and the world celebrated the first moon landing as a flawless mission. What nobody knew at the time was that the astronauts had nearly died on the way home. After the command module separated from the service module was supposed to fire its thrusters and veer off course. Instead, a wiring error caused it to fire the wrong jets, and it stayed locked onto the exact same path as the astronauts. As it burned apart during re-entry, debris began flying off directly behind them. Any large piece hitting the command module's heat shield could have torn it open and killed all three men instantly. The only reason it didn't happen was luck. A chaseplane pilot filmed the service module disintegrating in their wake and reported it after landing. NASA rewired the system before Apollo 12 flew again. The first moon landing, the mission remembered as humanity's greatest triumph, came home essentially by chance. Drowning in space. In 2013, Italian astronaut Luca Parmitano was on a routine spacewalk outside the International Space Station when he felt water trickling into his helmet. He assumed it was condensation from his drink bag and kept working. It wasn't. A pump inside his suit's cooling system had cracked, and coolant was leaking directly into his helmet in zero gravity. Where water doesn't drip, it floats and spreads. Within minutes, a golf ball-sized blob of water covered his eyes. Then it reached his nose. 90 feet above Earth, with no way to wipe his face, Parmitano could only breathe through his mouth. Mission Control ordered an immediate abort, but with his vision gone, he had to feel his way back to the airlock blind, guided only by memory and touch. When they finally got his helmet off, they drained 1.5 quarts of water from inside it. NASA added an emergency snorkel to every spacesuit afterward. Before this, no one thought a spacewalk could end in drowning. Broiling in orbit. On the 5th of June, 1966, astronaut Gene Cernan stepped out for what should have been a groundbreaking spacewalk on Gemini 9A. His suit had metal plating on the legs to protect against rocket exhaust, which made it almost as stiff as a suit of armor. There was no cooling system inside, so every bit of heat his body produced stayed trapped against his skin. Within minutes, his visor fogged completely from sweat. He was working blind, exhausted, his heart racing, unable to see what his hands were doing. Mission Control aborted the spacewalk after 2 hours, and Cernan barely dragged himself back through the hatch. When they finally got him out of the suit, he had lost 13 pounds of fluid in a matter of hours, roughly what a runner loses finishing a marathon. NASA had never anticipated that simply moving in a spacesuit could nearly kill an astronaut through heat alone. That single spacewalk is the reason every suit built after it includes liquid cooling. Deadly docking. On the 25th of June, 1997, the crew of Russia's Mir space station agreed to a test that never should have happened. To save money, Russia had disabled Mir's automatic docking radar, so cosmonaut Vasily Tsibliev had to guide an unmanned cargo ship toward the station by eye, watching a blurry black and white camera feed with no way to measure his speed or distance. By the time he realized he was closing in too fast, it was already too late. The cargo ship clipped a solar panel and slammed directly into the station's Spectre module, tearing a hole in the hull. Air began screaming out into space. The crew, including NASA astronaut Michael Foale, had only minutes to seal the module off before the station lost pressure completely. They made it, but barely. The entire disaster happened because a space agency chose to fly a 7-ton spacecraft blind rather than pay for the equipment that would have stopped this from ever being possible. Cheap chips, lost probe. In November 2011, Russia launched Phobos Grunt, a spacecraft designed to land on Mars's largest moon and bring soil samples back to Earth. It never even left orbit. Hours after launch, its engines failed to fire, stranding it circling uselessly above Earth. Rumors spread online that a mysterious signal had jammed it. The real explanation was far less exciting and far more damning. Investigators found the probe had been built using ordinary electronic components, the kind found in consumer gadgets, never rated to survive the radiation and temperature swings of space. The parts began failing almost immediately once exposed to conditions they were never designed for. Worse, ground control lost contact with the spacecraft the moment it passed out of range and could never re-establish communication to even diagnose the failure. For 2 months, engineers could only watch as it drifted, dead, in low orbit. On the 15th of January 2012, what was left of Phobos Grunt burned up over the Pacific Ocean. A mission meant to bring back the first samples from a Martian moon was defeated before it ever cleared Earth's orbit, by parts you could have bought off a shelf. The nuclear satellite that fell on Canada. In September 1977, the Soviet Union launched Cosmos 954, a spy satellite powered by a small nuclear reactor fueled with enriched uranium. It worked exactly as planned, right up until Soviet engineers lost control of it. With no way to guide the satellite or shut down its reactor, all they could do was watch as its orbit decayed and it began falling back toward Earth. On the 24th of January 1978, it tore through the atmosphere over northwestern Canada, scattering radioactive debris across more than 124,000 square kilometers of wilderness, an area larger than entire countries. A joint American and Canadian team searched for months and recovered only about a dozen large fragments, some so radioactive that standing near them for too long was dangerous. Those recovered pieces accounted for roughly 1% of the satellite. The other 99% either burned up on re-entry, sank into remote lakes, or is still out there somewhere in the Canadian wilderness to this day. A single nuclear reactor, launched into space with no real plan for what would happen if control was lost, came down on a country that had nothing to do with it. If you liked this video, drop a comment to share your thoughts and subscribe for similar ones.